Did you know that it's possible to make distilled spirits in your freezer? That's a fact. You can do this. Are you aware that it's also potentially illegal, which, if true, is the dumbest law in America? To find out for sure, I called an actual lawyer that specializes in alcohol, but not before trying some freeze distilling myself. I actually know quite a bit about distilling. I own a distillation equipment supply company, which I've been running for a very long time. So freeze distillation is the process of freezing low-proof alcohol and then removing the ice, which increases its strength. It's called applejacking because not all that long ago, freeze distillation was commonly used to increase the strength of hard apple cider. In the fall, apples would be picked and at some point they'd be crushed and juiced and fermented. Then the cider would be stored in barrels over the winter, and when it got cold enough, the barrels would be opened and the ciders and the liquid would be separated. So is applejacking dangerous? No. Absolutely not. But if you drank the same amount of, let's say, freeze distilled brandy as you drink traditionally distilled brandy, and you drank enough to get a hangover, you would have a worse hangover if you drank the freeze distilled brandy than you would if you drank the traditionally distilled. This is because traditional distilling removes impurities that freeze distilling will not. Freeze distilled brandy, for example, is no more dangerous than the original hard cider that you made it from. So why does applejacking work, and what's the actual process for doing it? It's actually pretty simple. Water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Pure ethanol freezes at negative 173 degrees Fahrenheit. That's almost the temperature of liquid nitrogen. And there's a huge difference between those temperatures. So if you chill hard cider, for example, down cold enough to freeze the water, but it's not cold enough to freeze the alcohol, and then you remove the ice and you leave the ethanol behind, you have increased the relative strength of the alcohol. Or rather, you've increased the relative proportion of the alcohol, making it stronger. And this can be done with any alcohol, not just hard cider. This is actually how ice beer is made. The American brand Ice House, for example, is made slightly stronger with freeze distillation. I think that beer is like 5.5% ABV, but you can make beverages a lot stronger. We're talking like 20 to 30% ABV just by freeze distilling it. Basically, the colder you can get it, the stronger you can make it. So exactly how is this done? Well, you have two options. Number one, you can take the easy route, which I did. You can go to the grocery store and you can buy yourself some cheap wine. Put this in a container that will fit in your freezer. I'm using one of these Clawhammer 1.25 gallon fermenters. And the first thing I'm going to try is actually just setting this outside overnight because it's supposed to be only 16 degrees tonight. It's winter where I am right now. I will just wait into the next day. And okay, what happened? It did not freeze. Either it just was warmer than expected, or it just wasn't cold enough for long enough. It will work, but it takes a little bit of time. And like I said, it has to be pretty cold. So if this is the case for you as well, it's not cold enough to do this outside, you're going to either need to use your house freezer or use a chest freezer. I actually bought this here freezer from a crackhead on Facebook Marketplace who had moved on to making meth or something like that and no longer needed it. So I just toss this in my living room because I'm classy like that. And then I set it to its coldest setting. I added the container of wine. I waited for 24 hours and this is what it looked like the next day. This freezer must be really cold because it's almost frozen solid. The next step is going to be cracking the nozzle on the bottom of the fermenter and letting the liquid drain out slowly, which looks like this. At this point, the wine is definitely a lot stronger than it was, but it can potentially be made even stronger if this process is repeated. Now you can also take the more difficult route and do it the way the good old-fashioned applejackers of years past did it. So this will involve buying yourself some apples, breaking them down with a fruit crusher, then pressing them in some sort of a press. I'm using an old-timey screw press here, which is pretty cool. You will want to pasteurize the liquid somehow. I prefer to use heat pasteurization versus chemical pasteurization, which makes a lot of people unreasonably mad. Most people prefer chemical pasteurization, but I've tried both, and all of the heat pasteurized cider I've ever made has been better, but that's just my preference. I used one of my clawhammer brewing kettles to heat pasteurize, and then the same deal as before, I'm adding this to a 1¼ gallon fermenter. I'm actually pouring it out of a tap. This was on tap as hard cider here in my office, but I had a leak in my CO2 system when I was out of town and everything went flat. So I thought, you know what, instead of recarbonating this, why don't I just try some freeze distilling? I put it in the freezer, I let it set for 24 hours, and then I pulled it out. This is what it looked like. I'm going to do the same thing I did with the wine. I will just crack the nozzle on the bottom of the fermenter and I'll leave it trickle out for as long as it takes. I'm actually really excited to try these. I've never made Applejack spirits. I've never tried them before. But you know what? I don't want to do anything illegal. So before I drink these, what I need to do is call my man John Semenkowitz from the Beer Law Center. He will be able to tell me exactly whether or not this is legal or illegal. All right. So you're an alcohol lawyer, which as far as like being a lawyer goes, is probably the coolest kind of lawyer, I would imagine. You're drinking scotch right now.
Right. And it's a business expense. So you can't beat that. Research and development. Yeah. So, I'm an alcohol attorney. I work almost exclusively with breweries, wineries, distilleries. If you produce or sell alcohol, I can probably talk to you about something.
For years, we've known each other now. Yeah. We've been reaching out to you with
way back when you first moved to Asheville, I think.
Yeah. I mean, which is probably almost 10 years ago, really. The reason we've reached out is because we're dabbling in some freeze distilling, or I'm just going to be honest, I've already done it. I was about to drink some, and then I thought, you know what? I should probably call John because I'm going to make a YouTube video about this, and I don't want to get myself into trouble.
Right.
So the question is what I've done legal? Do I need to dump this back into the half frozen container it came out of, or am I good to go here?
Okay. Now that the thing has already been done, because yes, what you've done is probably illegal. Here's the thing. So at the federal level, the TTB, that's the folks who collect the taxes and license distilleries and all that sort of stuff. Those folks say that any means of artificially increasing the concentration of alcohol, except through fermentation, is distilling. So whether you go through a distillation column, whether you make an ice beer, whether you freeze, distill, and scoop the ice off the top, that's all distillation as far as they're concerned.
Interesting.
So in theory, to do that, you should be a licensed distillery because they want you to pay taxes on it, right? So you damn sure don't want to sell it because now that's bootlegging and all sorts of other things.
Sure.
And now there are a few states where they've said, hey, home distillation is legal.
Yeah.
And in those states, essentially what's happening is the federal government is putting their fingers in the ears, go, okay, we know you're doing it, but we're not going to do anything about it, right? Because most of the time it's the states that are enforcing that. And so if you're in one of those states, cool, you're good to go. If you're not in one of those states, which is most of them, no, that product itself is probably illegal. Sorry.
Hypothetically, same in North Carolina, just hypothetically, of course. You're saying this is also illegal at the state level in North Carolina.
Correct.
Interesting. Okay.
I think you nailed one option, which is put it back, right? Just dump the stuff back. No harm, no foul. It's back to exactly the way I left it. All I did was spend some money on the heating and or the effort to do it, or cooling or whatever. That's all that the difference was. The other one is you just pour it down the drain.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, just destroy it.
So
they would prefer if you don't put it down the drain with your mouth and kidneys in between. But yeah, that at this point, especially when you're talking a container like that, I don't think anybody's gonna throw a fit, right?
Gotcha.
I know. Again, I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, and just next door in Johnston County is one of the old-timey moonshine meccas. And there are still people out there. You go to the right place, and people are selling White Lightning in gallon jugs out of the back of their cars, right? That's the folks that they're worried about.
Got it. Okay. I see. So to kind of recap what you're saying, there are federal laws and there are state laws. The federal government doesn't care. I mean, the federal government just says it doesn't matter what method you use to distill. If you're separating water and alcohol, it's not legal unless you have a federal DSP
Right.
or a fuel alcohol permit, right?
Right.
But the federal agent or the federal, yeah, I guess federal agencies or the federal government, they're not really likely to enforce a law like that. That's generally done at the state level. So it really, in like practical matters, it's more dependent if you're going to do this and you're worried about getting in trouble for it, which of course we're not advocating anybody do anything illegal for any reason, but you're more likely to get in trouble by a state official. And so if it's illegal in your state as well, then you're at more of a risk if you have done this, as you know, I may have done in here in North Carolina.
It's a matter of scale too. Are the federal revenuers going to break down your garage door because you've created a quart jar or something?
Gotcha.
No. You're running a business and have bought, you bought hundreds of empty 1-gallon jugs.
Gotcha.
That's a different issue.
Okay.
And yeah, the federal folks will come after that because they're interested in the taxes.
Yeah.
The state, you're more likely to get ratted out by your neighbors.
Gotcha. Okay. You know what we see a lot? We used to get Google News alerts on this. And the thing that popped up over and over again was a disgruntled spouse or like a domestic dispute situation where like the wife was like, hey, you might want to go look out on that shed before you leave. And that's what got a lot of people in trouble. Seemed to be very common.
So yeah, that's the kind of stuff that you're like, okay, manage your risk.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thanks for clearing that up.
Yeah, no worries.
I guess we'll just ask people to be respectful. If you're like, you just made your third beer and you're like, I want to start a brewery, please don't contact John. But if you're like a veteran, brewer, you're serious, you're going to start a brewery, you want to hire a lawyer and pay them to help you out, and you're in North Carolina, where can people find you?
That's easy. beerlawcenter.com. On all the social medias, we're at Beer Law Center. Happy to chat. And even if you're not in North Carolina, the folks who do what I do, there aren't that freaking many of us, and we kind of know each other. Yeah. So even if it's not me, if you're in Texas, if you're in Oregon, I'll help hook you up with the people that are out there that can help you. It's fun.
Okay. Sweet.
Kind of my evangelism for the industry. I don't own a brewery. This is how I help.
Nice. Cool.
So,
all right, man. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I appreciate the chat. Kyle, anytime, anything I can do, let me know, man.
Okay, will do. All right. I'll see you later, sir. I'll let you get back to your scotch.
All right. Cheers.
See ya. Bye. Cheers.